Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And I think we all can tell that healing right now is pretty stressful. You're going to have to be aware of a lot of offensive cooldowns in the game and position yourself perfectly if you want to survive the consistent onslaught that is the amount of burst damage currently available. So in this video today, I'm going to be giving you a little bit of a rundown from the healer perspective, being a resto druid, my thoughts and my actions in a match so that I am able to achieve victory, or at least have a higher likelihood of achieving victory. Sometimes you get got, sometimes you down goes. But to try and reduce those opportunities as much as possible, I think that it's very important for the healer to always be in control of the defensive cooldowns for your team. You can think of yourself almost as a shot caller. So you're the one who needs to be telling your Shadow Priest to use Dispersion. You're the one telling your warrior to use their Trinket and their Die by the Sword. These cooldowns that allow your partners to survive is something that you should be monitoring at all times and kind of calculating which is going to be the best trade to keep your team alive the longest. And I really think players like Botar, one of them, to kind of just pioneered that, being the defensive shot caller, being the unbreakable wall, and having this solid defense is going to be a very important component to making you desirable to teams. This is going to be something that players really like because they can focus on Zug Zug more damn because they know that they've got you in the back being a reliable outsource for defensive cooldown rotation. And that's what I'm going to be talking about mostly in this matchup here is when do you want to use those cooldowns? When should you be thinking about it? Where do you want to be standing before it happens so that you can stay ahead of it, so you can always be trying to make the most correct call at the right time? So against a Windwalker Monk and a Death Knight, things you want to be afraid of is being death gripped. So you want to stay maximum range away from your opponents. Also images, which is going to be a red icon that appears on the Omnibar here. Definitely recommend getting the Omnibar. You'll see that light up. That is a scary cooldown that you need to crowd control or trade defensives for, preferably crowd control, because sometimes you die through defensives and you'd sometimes just like to get away without using anything other than some crowd control. So starting the fight off behind the pillar, far away, getting innervate overgrowth, and then line of sighting, you can see that the Death Knights gripped us in and blinded us because we were standing too close, but our warrior is staying away so that he can come in and assist. But because we are all stacked like this is going to be a dangerous point in the game. This is when you want to be telling your teammates to help you. So our warrior uses Intimidating Shout because they were able to crowd control some of the cooldowns, but they were still able to continue. So we tell our warrior to help out more. They stun the Windwalker on their Trinket, and you can see we take basically no damage. So the warrior had complete control of the start of the fight by using crowd control. If they had gotten stunned, then using their Trinket and getting access to his abilities would be important. Then after the follow-up damage, they use Die by the Sword. And that's to make a more than fair trade with the incoming damage from that opening Death Grip. You're really only going to be taking a tremendous amount of damage during that big combo against a Death Knight. So you want to have that Die by the Sword. You want to have the fears and the stuns ready for that moment. And then you want to turn the table and start to get aggressive. So now you can see the enemy is doing the same here. As our priest has activated Void Form, they're doing a lot of damage. They're using their Iron Bark. They're using their anti-magic zone to overlap those defensives to bolster themselves up in the middle of the map to survive our big attack. After that, we just survived there. So they make an effective trade. Now both teams have made their big defensive cooldown trade. We can see Zwen called in, and the Zwen is big and red in the back. It shows up as this blue icon, and we've been death gripped into a stun. So this is another scary moment in the game. I use my Trinket because my Trinket lines up with the Zwen perfectly. It's 2 minutes for 2 minutes. I'll always be able to escape a stun during the Zwen, and the Zwen is the highest point of damage that the Windwalker Monk is going to be able to achieve, which is why I like lining up my Trinket that way, with a 2 minute with a 2 minute, or a 2 minute with a 3 minute. That way I can more safely make it through this setup, and I just save my bark skin because my bark skin will keep me alive during setups without the Zwen, but my Trinket will keep me alive during setups with the Zwen, and that's how I've allocated those resources, usually based on their timing. Here I get a bit aggressive. We survived their attack. I Cyclone their Windwalker at low health. This prevents the Windwalker from recovering, and it also prevented the defensive measures of their Touch of Karma by buying them more time. But here we're death gripped. We would like to get into bear form. Honestly, I'm standing too close to the Death Knight. My strategy here needs to be to stay further away. But if we get stunned here and we see images, we can use Bark Skin. We have no Trinket. We can see Pillar of Frost being activated. We're stacked up. We can see images. So Bark Skin is necessary here. They're going to trigger our automatic Frenzied Regen. We're going to go into bear form and likely Frenzied Regenerate again because we're going to get silenced at the end of the chain. But our Bark Skin was more than enough to keep us alive during this setup. And if we had trinketed during this one and not bark skinned, then we may die later to Zwen. So again, that's why I think it's important to know those 2-minute timers, get them all lined up, and you're going to see a ton of monks. After that, try and spread out, recover, see who they're swapping to. Seems like the priest is the target, so I'm going to load out my Cenarian ward, try to swift mend it to extend its heal, and then toss out the big regrowth with Soul of the Forest to the other target being my warrior, so that both targets can stabilize with healing. That's how I've split my resources to recover. And as soon as we've recovered, again, we should have been standing further away. If you do get gripped, you can jump into travel form, try and dash away, use a stampeding roar, try and escape the incoming stun lock. That will happen, but you do want to be standing further away than I was, honestly, in this clip. Then I just look for a reset. If the other team is looking to not engage, then a good way to pressure them to come fight is to drink as a healer. So if you ever notice the enemy team just running away, tell your team, I'm going for a drink. And if the enemy team isn't drinking, you are getting ahead. This is going to put you in a much favorable position over the opposing team rather than overextending and spending your mana. Now their druid panics, trying to cross the map to stop me from drinking, which then leads to them having to use their trinket into a cyclone, which then leads to a tremendous amount of pressure onto their Windwalker monk. And what went from a very passive play has suddenly now turned into a really aggressive play, which is why drinking it, you don't want to even think of it necessarily as a defensive measure, more so to kind of force your opponent to do something like, hey, I'm going to regenerate to full mana if you don't make a play, if the other team is being passive. And it can sometimes bait them into good positions like this, and you can capitalize on it, get a ton of cooldowns, almost get the kill. Here you can see the Windwalker turtling, so I'm just taking the time to do some damage with my team. It's very easy to heal through 1 DPS, but then we get Death Gripped into blind. So right now we have no Trinket, but they have no Zwen because we've lined those cooldowns up. We're trying to get into Bear Farm. We have Barkskin for this stun lock. We'll have some aid from our allies. Our Priest uses Trinket and Fade on top of our Barkskin for the stun lock, so my Priest isn't getting cleaved. My Priest can get away. Now it's only me that's going to be low health, so I can just recover myself by going into Bear Form and using Frenzied Regeneration. You'd like to couple this with Adaptive Swarm when you can, because it really actually makes it heal for quite a lot. The main reason my Priest needed a Trinket in this setup is I didn't have my Auto Frenzy, I believe, at the time. So having my Priest to be able to fade, immune all damage, and escape was going to be more valuable. They can also disperse later on if Zwen is used on them. That's going to be the fallback answer. So as long as you have a fallback, you're going to be in a good position. Right now, looking at this game, my warrior used Die by the Sword in the previous setup. Zwen is available, or at least coming up in the next 4 seconds. So my warrior is likely to be the target, as I will have a trinket to escape. So I'm lining up my biggest heals on my warrior, the Cenarian ward, and extending the Cenarian ward. I'm stabilizing my priest with the Nature Swiftness. They're making their trades, but here comes the Zwen. The blue tiger jumps into the fray. If they hit our priest will have dispersion to trade. If they hit our warrior, we can use Trinket and Iron Bark and get away if we get Death Gripped, and those are going to be our responses. You may want to save your Iron Bark and let players use their personal defensives, because you can use Iron Bark on anyone. So here, if they target the priest mostly, you're going to want the priest to disperse. Our warrior does a good job of just peeling the Zwen. I've used Mass Entanglement to root it. You want to use the Mass Root talent or single target root whenever you can on Zwen, on the images, get control of them. Incap Roar is great too if you get gripped into melee range. If you get control of those cooldowns, sometimes you don't even need to trade. Here I've honestly made a mistake. I think I pre-Iron Barked my priest anticipating to get Death Gripped, when in reality it's actually my warrior that is in a lot of trouble right now, not having Die by the Sword and not having their trinket. So wouldn't recommend doing what I actually just did at this specific second of the match. But again, playing in real time with the match, you might feel more anticipated, and this is why it's really good to go over your VODs, look at them. Where were you anticipating your cooldowns? Where did you make those trades? Here my priest makes a nice play by pre-fading, seeing the animation of me being Death Grip towards them. They use Fade to try and immune and run away, but they still get the stun lock. And I used my trinket because Zwen was used, relatively around this time. It wasn't perfectly, but if I didn't, we might not ever be able to recover regardless. And I want my trinket to line up as much as I can with Zwen, or at least the setup with Zwen. They're gonna have to delay their leg sweep later on, and then we're gonna use Cenarian Ward on the priest, who took that big chunk of damage. We had to use Disperse as well, and we can Innervate, Overgrowth the off target, Nature Swiftness, and try and get a recovery moment. So whoever I Cenarian Ward, I'm usually Nature Swiftnessing the other target. That way I can split my heal and get a good recovery across the board. Once we're recovered, we can get aggressive. We need to look at who's playing passive. It looks like their druid may be going for a drink, so we can pressure one of their targets to force them to stop drinking. So I toss my Adaptive Swarm out aggressively onto the DK. I dot the DK with Moonfire. That's going to add at least quite a bit of extra damage, maybe 15, 2k a tick. I'm going to Fleshcraft while nothing's going on to just get that shield up because they have been gripping me and swapping to me, and I have no trinket. This is me preempting the attack coming my way, and I see the druid trying to cross the map. So I could try and go in there, get some crowd control. We need to survive their setup though. Our warrior avoids the AoE stun, intervenes over, fears all the DPS on their setup, and now we're in a good position where I can chase the druid. The monk and the DK are in a fear. I can get aggressive. I can try and clone. Their druid denies me from cloning by using fleshcraft to immune it. But whenever you can see these safe moments to go for crowd control, it is a good idea to do it. But don't generally over push it. Don't push it past its limit where they're in the middle of stunning you, gripping people, and you're trying to clone. More likely than not, you're going to die there. Here we stun the druid. We silence the druid's trinket. We get pressure onto the Death Knight. I want to continue this crowd control off the silence, so I jump in with my in-cap roar, and I can in-cap the druid behind the pillar, and then cyclone the druid behind the pillar, and then try and recover my Shadow Priest here, because this felt like a really good moment to try and go for the win. Having gotten that cyclone, their Death Knight uses Icebound Fortitude, which may sometimes not even be enough here if we have enough damage to get them into execute range. So they're actually desperately blinding defensively. They're stunning before they're gripped because they're in a panicked moment on their offense, which they may not have been if they were just completely recovered at full HP and we didn't chase the druid to heal. So being offensive there actually put them on the back foot to where their setup was kind of botched. Here I'm going to cyclone the monk at low health. There's not a lot going on. I want to deny their recovery, and we actually get the monk's trinket, which means they won't be able to trinket a stun later if we swap. But we can see a lot of damage coming out at the moment with not too many cooldowns, honestly, right? Like we're looking at the Omnibar. There's no Zwen. There's no images currently active. So we don't really want to use our Iron Bark. We would just use Cenarian Ward, try and recover otherwise without committing the Nature Swiftness or the Iron Bark. Those are really important to surviving once those cooldowns have been committed, but they're 2 seconds away at this point. They have their really big setup available. I should have been positioning further away than I am. I think I try to go for Cyclones in this position, but that's going to be really risky considering they have Pillar of Frost. I still go for it. We actually end up getting the Death Knight cloned at low health, preventing their attack, but this is Zwen now out from the Windwalker monk that's attacking my priest, and my trinket is misaligned from not trinketing when it was active. I don't think they CC'd me, which made it a bit awkward, and then their burst damage came later. They end up running away during their Zwen, which is really not optimal. Obviously, they're running out of options to stay alive. So I just jump at the druid. I drop a vortex. This is to pin the druid out by the pillar so I can cast clone without them escaping. My warrior, I think, was running Kyrian, so you got to be careful about DRing the Spirit Bastion on the DPS. So using the vortex to pin the healer for a cyclone is going to be a great fallback. And then just go for 3 cyclones on the druid with 2 of his allies at low health. He's got way more than a tough decision to try and recover from that point with Shadow Word Death and Sweeping Strike executes, and he's not going to be able to recover. We're going to get a double kill. So when your teammates are setting up the stun silences, that's the moment for you to jump into the enemy healer and try and crowd control. Don't be trying to jump in when the enemies have their cooldowns available. They're trying to stun you because you're just walking in for trouble. That ended up happening to that druid when they tried to move in and stop my drink. They ended up getting crowd controlled a ton. So finding your moments, taking those moments, trying to be the shot caller, paying attention to offensive cooldowns, calling defensive cooldowns for your ally is a very important component to being one of the best healers in the game, one of the most desirable and one of the most successful in my mind. It's been proven throughout history with multiple arena tournament competitors rising to the top using this type of strategy, and it's something that I'm always trying to work on being better, and it makes me better doing it. So other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. If you did like it, hit it with a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with everything World of Warcraft and enhance your experience. I do my best to relay patch changes and updates and item changes and all that stuff here in real time, so it's going to be a great news resource for you. And I do guides as well for stuff that I'm interested in the game, which at the moment is PvP, and honestly the Mage Tower has been really interesting me as well. Perhaps some other content in the future, but kind of the PvP guy at the moment. And other than that, you can follow me on twitch.tv/Supatease, streaming every day at 11 a.m. PST. We do VR games. I've helped over 60 people push their rating to their desired thresholds and learn how to play the game, or just have some fun and play for some games. Other than that, thank you very much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.